Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of React Roundup. I am your host today, TJ Van Tol, and with me on the panel is Jack Harrington.
Hello.
And I also, before we introduce our guests, I want to encourage people, we haven't done this at the top of the show, but encourage you to come hang out with us in our Discord channel. So you will find a link in the show notes, or if not, and we failed, you can also find by just Googling React Roundup and finding a link. We hang out in there. And if you have any questions from the show, anything that comes up, feel free to pop in there and come hang out.
Yes, please.
Cool. And with that, I want to introduce our special guest today. We have Iva Kop, Kopraleva, right? Did I get it right, more or less?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Iva, welcome to React Roundup. Do you want to start by telling people who you are, what you do, why you're famous, all those good sorts of things?
So I don't know if I would say that I'm famous. I'm a React developer. I currently work for a company that is called CitizenLab. And what we're doing is we're creating a software product that is helping governments create good conditions for citizenship participation. So basically, we're providing a platform where citizens can do different things like engage in ways of giving ideas or maybe voting on certain proposals, taking surveys and things like that. So this is my main job and what I do by day. Other than that, I also like to write technical content and technical articles. I am currently writing mostly on my own blog, which is called Where's the Mouse?
Nice.
Yeah. And yeah, I also write guest articles sometimes for Free Code Camp and LogRocket.
This is very fun. It's an awesome blog. I like the name, and the design of this is really fun as well.
Hey folks, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and lately I've been working on actually building out Top End Devs. If you're interested, you can go to topenddevs.com/podcast, and you can actually hear a little bit more about my story about why I'm doing what I'm doing with Top End Devs, why I changed it from devchat.tv to Top End Devs. But what I really want to get into is that I have decided that I'm going to build the platform that I always wished I had with devchat.tv, and I renamed it to Top End Devs because I want to give you the resources that are going to help you to build the career that you want, right? So whether you want to be an influencer in tech, whether you want to go and just max out your salary and then go live a lifestyle with your family, your friends, or just traveling the world or whatever, I want to give you the resources that are going to help you do that. We're going to have career and leadership resources in there, and we're going to be giving you content on a regular basis to help you level up and max out your career. So go check it out at topenddevs.com. If you sign up before my birthday, that's December 14th. If you sign up before my birthday, you can get 50% off the lifetime of your subscription. Once again, that's topenddevs.com.
Yeah, and so we reached out to you about initially about some of the stuff about really React code quality, right? Like different things in terms of best practices, in terms of structuring React components, setting up robust React projects. So maybe you could just start by introducing, what inspired you to write about that sort of stuff, and then maybe we can then transition from that into some specific tips you might have as well.
Sure. So I think that one of the main things for me, especially when it comes to writing articles and just sharing knowledge in general, is that it helps me think things through really well. So if I write an article about it, that means I need to understand an idea or something that I'm interested in well enough so that I can explain it to someone else. And I think that's really kind of the benefit that I get from the writing, apart from, that it's nice to share knowledge and connect with other developers. And this is really a good way to do that as well. But for me, just synthesizing information, and especially in ways that I haven't perhaps seen it somewhere else, and just helps me learn and be better at coding and also writing. So I think it's super nice.
Teaching is the best way of learning, for sure. It helps you organize and structure everything. It's great. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. If you can explain it to someone else, then you understand it.
Oh, yeah.
And did you get into code quality just from running into work stuff, or was it personal projects, or I guess what inspired you to write about that specifically?
Yeah, so I think that I like it when my life is easy.
As we all do.
And I think that there's many ways that developers can do to make their lives a lot easier than it actually is. And what I started, when I started to work on different projects and in different teams, I started to realize that there's like really some relatively simple steps that you can take. And it doesn't really matter what it's about, right? It could be how you structure your code. It could be how you kind of make something more reusable or more flexible. Or it could be just a basic developer setup, right? So just having a linter, having something like a formatter in place, things like that can make your life like so much easier. And then it can make you also yourself much more productive, because when you everybody has a limited bandwidth, I guess, and you shouldn't fill it with things that can be automated in whatever way.
Oh yeah.
So then this is, I think the thing that I'm most passionate about is when I see something that can be solved like relatively easily, but I don't see it implemented in a lot of places. I really like to write an article about it so that I kind of share my learnings and my way of doing things, and hopefully help someone or people find it useful.
Yeah, definitely. And it's in particular, this is somewhere like, I've talked to Angular folks and I've talked to React folks. It's like Angular does this really well, right? They have all their projects structured. You know where everything is. But when you get into a React project, you're like, they're all different. You're like, what is going on here? Where is this? Where's the code for this? So, can you give us like just kind of a shorthand? Like what are some recommendations that you have if you don't have any structure at all? Like, oh, you gotta do this, gotta do that.
Yeah, so I think that you're very right. React is very unopinionated, which can be like both a good thing and a bad thing.
Yes.
Because it gives you a lot of freedom. And if you know how to use this freedom, it can be amazing and you can create really cool things with it. But yeah, definitely in some cases, it's not so easy. And it's true. Every project is different and it very much depends on context also, how you structure it. So it's one thing if you write like, for example, a component library, it's totally different thing if you write a React app. And so obviously it depends on context. But one kind of universal tip that I would have when it comes to structuring code is I think that with React, collocation is super important. So basically, if you have a React component, you want to put things that are related to this component together. So let's say you have the index file for the component itself. Maybe you have some, styles related to it. It should be like right next to the component so that you don't have to find like a style sheet in like a totally different part of the project. If you have a test for it, it should be right next to it because it acts not only as, gives you confidence, and it's nice to have tests, generally, like, in my opinion, but it's also like a documentation thing, right? So whenever you have a component and you have the test right next to the component, then you very easily can understand what this component is about, what it does. The same thing goes for, it depends a bit on what you're building, but if you're using a tool like Storybook, for example, and you are writing stories for these components, they should be there as well. Right? So then you can click super easily, okay, that's my code, that's my story for it, that's my test for it, that's my styles for it. Everything's there. And I've seen a lot of projects that don't follow this structure. So normally they would have like one place for the styles, for example, one place for have this, it was popular, I guess, in the past, maybe not so much anymore, but this kind of a container component structure where you keep the components that are just mostly visual or just don't have much logic in them in one place, and then you keep the logic in another place. And I find this more confusing than just collocating things that belong together, really together. And yeah, this is my advice. If you're structuring something from scratch, maybe think about collocating things that belong together and really keep them together.
Yeah, I love that tip. And I've violated it many times and sort of learned the hard way. I actually feel like lots of times the defaults don't do that, because I feel like having just started a Next.js app, I feel like their defaults creates like a styles folder. I'd have to look now, but or at least if not the actual like boilerplate, like I feel like lots of times online examples still encourage you to separate these things. Styles and tests is the other one. I feel like having a test folder that's like a mirror of your main source folder is still a pretty common practice and something I've still do as well. But I tend to agree. I like your tip that putting them together, I can see the benefit of doing that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also to be clear, like there's no one strict rule that anyone can follow, right? It's every project is different, every code base is different. So depending on the context, it might make total sense to separate some of that and put it somewhere else, for example. So it's very context dependent. And like I tend to always preface, like whenever I write an article or talk to people, I always say like, just think critically about your context, because you have to consider a lot of things and you have to juggle a lot of things. And for example, okay, I love collocation. If I work on a project that doesn't have that or follows a bit of a different convention and I have to rewrite the entire database so that I follow this one principle, then I probably won't do that, right? So it's very important to keep in mind that, this advice, any advice, it's never going to be like 100% universal.
Yeah, there's definitely three states. There's like not having any conventions at all. And then there's having conventions that aren't what you like. And then there's having conventions that you like, right? And so certainly at a cultural level, when you get onto a team, if there are conventions, but they're just not the one you like, then you probably don't want to fight that. If it's working, just keep it working.
Yeah, it's always easiest. Good, Iva.
I was just going to say, what they say, like if it's not broken.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't fix it.
Yeah, I find that those sorts of things are easiest to decide on at the start of a of a project, if possible. But lots of times it's always hard because lots of times you only learn through once you get to scale, right? So it's you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't, in a way.
That's very true.
What other tips do you have for us, Iva? Because that was an excellent one. Is there any other advice for like beginners, either whether it's like component related or project structure related?
Yeah, so I can only kind of go from my own experience, and I'm a self-taught developer. So basically what I did is one day I sat on a computer and kind of learned how to code totally on the internet. So this is, I guess that it depends a little bit on your background, the kind of things that you would struggle with when you're learning to code and when you're a beginner. But coming from my perspective, one of the things that I found really hard in the beginning is just thinking in terms of not visually, in terms of like pages or like larger chunks of generally when we talk about UI, but thinking in terms of components. And this was like a kind of a mind shift that React really forces you to make at some point. And one of the things that I found really difficult was to know every single component state from the beginning and think about it and consider it and really implement it in a way that makes sense. Because normally what happens, especially if you're a junior developer, is you receive like the design from the designer, or maybe you make it yourself if you're really talented, but you get like an image of what you have to build. And the website is the thing that you're building is not an image, right? It's a thing that's alive, it's interactive, it's very, very different from the design that you get. And if you get the image of that, like it's really difficult for that image to convey all the information that you need to have in order to implement the thing in the right way. So a concrete example of that would be like any UI that deals with data fetching in any way. So you can have like a super nice image of a table where all the rows are super nice and the images fit and the text is, the correct length and everything is just, it looks super nice on the design. And then when you get the actual data or when you try to work with like actual, just real life.
Yeah, it just totally blows
websites,
up. Right.
There's a lot of things to consider. So the one thing to consider is, okay, what happens until I wait for this data to come, right? So I need to have like some sort of a loading state there. It has to look okay for the user. They have to know that they're waiting for something, right? You have to give them the necessary information. And then, so what happens, for example, then when I switch the page? And I have to wait for the data for the second page, right? So I have like this one loading state before, but should I use the same one? Well, no, because I already have some data to display. So I need like a kind of a another loading UI so basically for the different scenarios when I have data and when I don't have data. So in the one case you have something to show, so you better show it. So that's like one of the things that it's really hard from the beginning, right? It's really hard to get this picture from just looking at the design. What happens if there's no data, right? So you need an empty state of some sort. What happens if there's an error on the server? You have to have a mechanism to let the user know that something is wrong so all of these sorts of things just make it a lot more complex than following the design. And I find that super interesting. It was a challenge in the beginning, but definitely something that I think comes with practice, and it's also like it makes it challenging and it makes it interesting to like build super nice UIs that are usable and overall working nicely.
Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, it's not just and there's also like the empty state where you loaded the data, but it's empty, right? And so you probably want to put it in like a call to action, like, hey, you should add some data here, or you should add a role or something like that, if it's a list of roles. And then I've always seen where people, they'll spend a ton of time like pixel managing like the desktop view, like, oh, this header needs to be over by 2 pixels and needs to be a little bit bolder and whatnot. And you're like, okay, cool. But you're missing, as you say, all the loading states, the empty data state, all the responsive states, like where where is that on this mockup? And that's like 95% of the work.
Yeah, you're so right about that. I think that pixel perfect, I don't know where this term even came from. It was probably before I became a developer. It was a thing. Like what I mean is that it's probably really old, but I don't think that it exists such thing, right? So when you really take into account all of the different states, all of the different scenarios, all of the different, like, especially if you're working with dynamic data, like all of that, and together with, as you said, responsiveness, which is a given nowadays, right? There's no websites that are not responsive anymore. And where is this like pixel perfection? It kind of evaporates very, very quickly.
Oh, very rapidly.
But oh man, so if you're wondering where the term came from, so back in the day of web development and design,
Flash.
we used to on our websites put a little thing on the site that said something. We would legit say this website was designed to be viewed in an 800 by 600 browser.
Oh,
like that
yes.
text would show up.
About that.
Really?
And you would literally design your site for that type of, because there were only like X number of resolutions that your site was reasonably going to be viewed in. So you'd code to the most common one and you would put that text on your website. So you legitimately could make it pixel perfect because you were coding to a legit, like a specific number of pixels. So you could get it exactly as you wanted down to the pixel. And those people viewing it on that exact monitor would have a great experience. But obviously that's dated more than a little bit at this point because it got dated pretty quickly as people got bigger monitors and then
and that was pre-media queries. So
not to mention, this almost like predates CSS though. I mean, we're going back into the 90s and such, but you shouldn't be using shouldn't be using approaches like that nowadays though. We've moved well beyond that.
You're right, though. It's a terrible marketing term. I'm sure it was come up with by marketers who wanted to sell a product to like make sure you had pixel perfect designs. Will never code.
Yeah. That's a really amazing story. I never realized that this was how it used to be in the past. So super interesting. Yeah. So I think that one of the ways to really go about it when it comes to modern UIs, and one of the things that I've been pretty consistently having a good experience with is using not this kind of pixel perfect or not even designing in this way where you make everything custom and make every page, for itself, but really thinking components, but both in terms of the design and in terms of the UI itself or in terms of React components.
Preach it. Design systems all the way. Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. So you know exactly where I was going with this.
Oh yes. No. Go. Yes. The more people, the better know this.
This is what I wanted to exactly what I want to say, right? So if you create a sensible design system from the start. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to, so it always evolves. You will always need more options. You will always need more components. That's not, it's not an issue. It should be evolving, right? You cannot make it perfect from the start. But if you have a good foundation, if you lay it out in a way that really makes sense for your product or your UI, like whatever you're trying to create, then this really streamlines the whole process. So from the design, the designer knows exactly what building blocks they can use. They know how to put it together. They know how to make it nice. If they need something extra, they can of course coordinate and build it together with whoever is developing the component library. So again, it's not that it's super rigid and strict, but as long as the foundation is there, it's really so much easier because they can give you a wireframe and you can, based on that wireframe, take the components that you have and you normally use and then like build a UI that is super, first of all, it would look nice if you did your job correctly.
Yeah.
And second of all, it would be super consistent with what you already have elsewhere. If you're building a new feature, it's not going to look totally different. You don't have to, like, as you said before, measure pixels, because it's measured for you, normally. So you would have like some kind of a spacing system where you have like fixed units or something where normally how much space you would put between things. You won't have to think about font sizes. You won't have to think about certain behaviors. So when this opens, what's the animation or something like that? This would be all, done for you. And it's another like great benefit is if you decide to change it, you change it in one place.
And it fixes it everywhere. Exactly.
Yeah. So this is really something that I feel it's been almost, I think that a lot of companies and a lot of products are doing this already, and a lot of people are appreciating the benefits of that. But just wanted to mention it as a really good way to, if you talk about structuring React application, I think that's one of the main building blocks that you should consider. And it's also not to say that you have to build, not every product needs a component library that's built from scratch. So there's some excellent options out there. My favorite one is Chakra UI, for example. There's some others, really good ones that you can use. So you don't even have to reinvent the wheel with that. You can just use it.
Hi, this is Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs, and lately I've been coaching some people on starting some podcasts and in some cases just taking their career to the next level. Whether you're beginner going to intermediate going to advanced, whether you're trying to get noticed in the community or go freelance, I've been helping these folks figure out how to get in front of people, how to build relationships, and how to build their careers and max out and just go to the next level. So if you're interested in talking to me and having me help you go to the next level, go to topenddevs.com/coaching. I will give you a 1-hour free session where we can figure out what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and figure out what the next steps are. And then from there, we can figure out how to get you to the place you want to go. So once again, that's topenddevs.com/coaching.
Yeah, one of the great things, like Material UI has libraries already done for Figma, for Adobe XD. So if you can work with your designer and say, okay, cool, we're just going to, skin material, right? And it's going to have our color palette and this and that, right? Material is going to do all this awesome stuff in React to handle accessibility, I18N, all of that, right? So the components are really good. And then on their side, they can just literally drag and drop from the Material UI template, like, okay, this is a button. This is a contained button. This is a text button. This is a data grid with these properties, and they can just literally like tick, 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 tick. And then, there are actually like other pieces of code out there that will go and generate the React for you from that. I'm iffy on that one, but like at least having that ability to sync up with your designers so that you're both talking your standard components is awesome.
Exactly. And one other like super big benefit that I think often gets overlooked, but it's really, really important, is the accessibility aspect of this. So basically, whenever you're building, it doesn't matter if you're creating your own component library or you're using some of the existing ones, it's very easy at the component level, at the component stage, to make the things accessible by default. And what that means is that whenever you use this component all over your application, you can make it, consistent, not only in terms of colors or borders or how it looks or how it behaves, but you can always make sure, okay, this thing, screen readers, for example, recognize it. So one very easy way to illustrate this is, for example, if you're creating an image component. And okay, so one other caveat, if you're using TypeScript. So if you're enforcing, let's say, the types of the props, one thing that you can do is you can say, okay, the alt text for every instance where I'm using this image component is a mandatory prop. So you cannot not put it there, right? It could be an empty string, but you cannot not have it. Right. And in that way, you're just building the component in such a way that you are guaranteeing essentially that it's by default always will be used correctly also when talking about accessibility, which I think it's huge and it's really important.
It's not, it's super huge, and people are always like, oh, no, accessibility, I don't want to deal with this. But it's like, what's worse? Like dealing with accessibility in code or dealing with it in a courtroom? Because you can get sued if your site, particularly if you're a big company. I used to work for Nike, and it was a big deal, right? We did big accessibility checks all the time to make sure that anything that was customer facing was absolutely accessible.
Yeah, I think that the legal aspect is there definitely, and especially for me in my work, because we're working with governments, it's something that we absolutely need to think about, and there's like super strict EU regulation around that. However, I think that it's also like a basic empathy aspect to it, right?
Yeah,
so just
exactly.
For a moment, try to put your mouse away and just close your eyes and just try to navigate your website. Just turn on, the screen reader. Just try it like for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And you can very quickly build this kind of understanding and see why this is, so important. And the internet is for everyone, right? It's not just for,
But even if you're totally an unempathetic person, building accessible sites tend to just make them better for everybody. Yeah. Like, I don't have any traditional disabilities. I don't have trouble using a keyboard or mouse or anything, but I like when forms are like make sense. Like I can tab through them, right? Because I can type really fast. So anytime somebody screws up the tab order in the form, or if they have a custom select that I can't use with a keyboard or custom radio buttons I can't use with a keyboard, it just makes me irrationally angry, right? Like I know it's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but it's like deeply affects me, right? Like I feel more negativity towards your system now, because how dare you implement this custom select with your custom colors just so it like looks nice, but I can't use tab down arrow. Like, come on.
I am irrationally angry about that one. Maybe rationally angry, because it's like, the designer is like, oh, I just want it to be, a little bit more roundy button. You're like, you're literally throwing away basic mechanics of everything to get it slightly roundier. Come on, man. Like, give me a break.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's very true.
Right there.
It's very true. And I think that there's another aspect to this that also I don't hear a lot of people talk about, which is it actually makes developer experience better.
Oh, yeah.
So if you structure your code in a way that makes sense, I think that also the developers on the team benefit from that, right? So everybody benefits when it makes sense, I guess is the is the conclusion of that. But definitely if you structure your pages in a way that's semantic, for example, then when I open the code, I know that, for example, this is a section, this is a nav, this is, if you are using headings properly, I know like how the page hierarchy is structured. It's very basic things like that, but it does make it better, and it does make it make more sense, even on the code level, and just when you're reading it and when you're working with it.
Yeah. Despite how novel your marketing says that your site is, it really probably comes down to reading and writing and updating stuff from a database. And it's the same way all around, right? There are a lot of different ways to do that, but the more conventional, the better. The least surprising, the better.
Yeah, I think that I agree that it's good when users are not surprised by the behavior.
I think the
Oh,
users
man.
agree. Being one,
Yeah.
I agree.
I could go off. Forms are my big one. I could go on a total rant about. It's amazing how many small things bother me.
Dark patterns are my. I hate dark patterns where they like put the little like, yes, you want to subscribe as the huge button, and then like the kind of tiny 8-point text. Like, no, yeah, I don't want to subscribe. You know, that's what I wanted. Really.
I think that forms are really difficult. Just it's the most basic thing. You expect it on every website, but to really make it work nicely, there's a lot that comes into it. And it's also, again, like this conversation about what are the different states and what is the behavior that we're expecting as users, right? So for example, super simple example is validation. So you want to validate your fields, right? Of course, you probably do that on the front end. You probably do that on the back end as well. And there's different kinds of validation. So for example, if I start typing in a field, I don't want to immediately start screaming at me that it's invalid email when I haven't finished typing my email. So this is very, very basic thing. And of course, I want to have it show me the error whenever I am, whenever it's appropriate. But then again, when do you show the error exactly? It's a little bit tricky, right? Because one way would be to show all the errors on submit, but maybe that's not such a good experience, right? Because the person has to fill out the entire form, then click submit, then realize they have an error, go back. Maybe it's not the best experience, but then, so there's different approaches to that. Maybe you want to show it on blur. Maybe you want to show it on change, but not, initially. So there's like a lot of discussion, and I don't think that there's one definitive answer. My whole point is that forms are hard,
Forms are hard.
Imagine if just for
use a form manager.
Yeah.
Well, React Hook form can give you, like, you basically tell it, check on blur or check on change or check on this. And you don't have to deal with the mechanics of any of that. You basically just set up the validation rules that you want. Hey, it's got to be a phone number. Here's the regex, and there you go. And it handles all that stuff, which is great. But,
it's really good. I really like it as well. And there's another, I guess, a little bit tricky aspect to it. So imagine if you have like async validation, because not everything that you can check on the client. So for example, if you have like a sign up form and you have to check whether this email is already used or something like that, right? There's no way to know that just on the front end. So it makes it even more complicated in a way to handle these types of validations. And I agree that definitely forms are probably the one component that needs like the most attention and care when you're building something to make sure that it really doesn't infuriate whoever is using it.
Big. Yeah, because in addition to all the things you brought up, usually you have your own business requirements that you have to worry about too. Because in addition to like getting and I think that's what can make it kind of hard, because as developers, we get laser focused on, well, my business users asked for this thing that does this, so I'm going to do it. And you can lose track of the little UX things, right? That because those aren't the things you're necessarily being graded on per se, or the thing that you're being asked to do. There's sometimes just like ancillary tasks that it's sort of on you to get right, in a sense, because at least in companies I've worked at in the past, sometimes business users won't come back and say like, oh yeah, that works great, but it doesn't work with a keyboard. Like very few people are going to complain with that. Lots of times it's on development to sort of get these sort of things right. Unless you have some companies, you have good UX people, good QA people that can help validate that sort of thing too.
Yeah. You need people who are going to push back a little bit and push back to like the standard. Like, oh, I want the little star that says that it's, it's a required field, but you don't have it or something like that to be on the left on this side as opposed to on the right. And you're like, why? You're only asking in this one field. Like, I don't need to burn credibility every single time, but we're pushing back on that. I'd rather like get some backup, hey, UX person, give a little pushback here, please.
I will say that's the trickiest situations I've been in is when you have a designer that's in like a position of power that like really likes the look of something, right? And pushes heavily for it. And as a developer, you can try to push back in those situations, but sometimes it can be tricky, right? If you have a designer that really wants something to look and work a specific way, it can be a tough situation to be in, but it's a fight worth fighting.
Never been there.
I'm thinking of one specific situation. So,
yeah, it's definitely a negotiation, right? So you have to balance, on the one hand, the designer and what they think is best. And also, like, I firmly believe that people do things with good intentions, right? So if anyone has like a super strong opinion on something, it's not because it's personal against you. It's probably because they don't understand the problem, or they don't appreciate it, or maybe there's some education that needs to happen, and just open communication where you just explain the problem. And then ideally, and of course there's different people, right? There's stubborn people that won't always respond to this kind of treatment, but generally speaking, and from my encounters in tech teams, if you have good arguments, people will normally hear you out, and they would do what you suggest if it makes sense. But yeah, that's the designers are on the one hand, the product people are on the other. So they have like specific other needs that they need to cover. They have like a different set of priorities, different things in their heads. So it's always a balancing act, and it's always a team effort for that reason, right? Because you can develop like the most amazing website with like the most accessible forms that work with the keyboard and just with the thought, you think it and it feels it's super nice. And then if nobody's using it, there's no really, So
it's very, complex, very well said.
I think it's important to keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, because I think you said it extremely well, because in those cases, it was lots of times, the business people wanted to see the features put out so that the users could use it. And going back to like get accessibility and keyboard usage right would take a few days. Well, it's like, they want us moving on to the next thing, because those are the things that actually ship some value and get people using the app. So I like the way you frame it. It's just, you got to find a balance, because the extremes on both ends are really not moving the business forward. So you got to talk about it and meet in the middle.
So the schedule is always a good point of negotiation. It's like, you build this custom component, but that would take 2 weeks, or you get something off the shelf that would take half a day, if we just do it regular way.
So Iva, I'm also curious, because you've taught yourself software development, which is really, really awesome. And I know we have a lot of listeners in that same sort of boat. So I'm curious what recommendations you have. And I guess both in terms of like, is there any online material that you found especially useful? And then as probably a little bit more involved question, because we also had listeners that struggle to break in, like to find their first job. And because it's a big jump from just going through some online classes to actually getting a job and getting paid to do software development. So I'm curious what advice you have to people going through any sort of stage of that process.
Yeah. So the first piece of advice, I guess something that I would definitely say is that before you invest a lot of time and a lot of effort into becoming, learning how to code or becoming a developer, because I think it's very common now, salaries in the sector are pretty high. A lot of people are jumping in. They want to become developers. They want to, learn. They want to get their first job. And all of that is like super nice, right? Don't get me wrong. I really want more people. I want also, more diverse people and all of that. However, what I would suggest to everyone is to just try a bunch of free resources first before they spend a lot of money on like something like boot camp or university degree or a lot of this is not if you are just starting university, right? This is if you are wanting to switch careers or something like this. So before you invest a lot of time and effort and money into this, just really test the water first, see if that thing is for you, because maybe you like it and maybe you love it and maybe you make a career out of it and you're super happy with it. And it's what happened to me, but maybe also you don't really like it and maybe your time is better spent elsewhere. And you can find that out without spending hundreds, possibly thousands of dollars. And so this would be my one piece of advice to everyone who wants to jump. And I really don't want to jump into it, and I really don't want to discourage anyone with this. Like, definitely do it. Just do it smartly and for free. And on that note, one cool resource that I would recommend and that really helped me a lot, especially in the beginning when I was learning, is Free Code Camp. It's an amazing website. It's I think that they're currently also updating their curriculum to include a lot more than just JavaScript. So you can learn all sorts of things there. You can learn front end, back end. I'm not sure if they're launched it already, but I think it's if it's not there, it's definitely coming. It's like a machine learning course. So it doesn't really matter what kind of field you want to go into. Definitely go and check out this website. It's a non-profit organization, so it's completely free. You can do a lot with it, right? You can really test it and try it and understand if it's for you. And then if it is, and if, you want to buy books or you want to buy courses, then that's a whole different story. But you're coming a little bit more prepared and understanding what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, I wish I knew some way to figure out if someone has that kind of maker's mentality, right? Because I think that's what you really need. You need that kind of, I'm the kind of person who takes stuff apart and tries to figure out how it works, or I'm very interested in how it all fits together or something like that. Because I work with a lot of folks at various levels of having this skill. And there's definitely folks who they'll go and they'll when they run into something, they'll hit up the error and they'll be like, oh, what does this error mean? And they'll kind of dig into it. And then there are other folks who just immediately I'm going to go over to Stack Overflow and just kind of copy and paste in this error and just see what, blah, blah, blah. And then you're not really learning anything. You're not giving yourself that opportunity to really build up those muscles of I see this thing fail. How do I make this thing work? And that's just a critical skill. If you really want to go from, junior to lead, you're going to run into stuff that there's no Stack Overflow safety net for weird, deployment errors on blah, 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 blah. You got to be able to actually figure it out.
Yeah, I guess I have a bit of I agree with you generally, but one thing that I would add and maybe have a little bit of a different perspective on is that it's not necessarily important to do that from the start, because in the beginning it's so overwhelming. The amount of information that you get just from trying to do something that you've never done before is really, really, it can be very even discouraging or demotivating at times, because you've never done this before. You don't know how it works. You don't know anything, right? And you're trying to build a basic HTML page, and then to having to dig super deep into every single issue that you encounter with this, it's probably not super productive at this stage. And I completely agree that if you want to advance and if you want to be, a senior developer, and if you want to, have this really deep knowledge and understanding of what you're doing, you definitely need to do that at some point. Just when you're a beginner and when you're starting out, just make it work, make it do the thing that you want it to do. Copy paste code, it doesn't matter. You understand it later. Just make it do something. And then once you get this adrenaline hit from, seeing nothing on the screen to seeing something, and that something does what you want it to do, I think that this is really the motivating factor from there to really dig deeper and understand further and build more things. I can tell you about my very first project that I built with React, and I think that it took me probably a month or something. I had to build one of the free code exercises that I was doing at the time was to build the game of life.
Oh yeah.
And it's very simple. Yeah. It's very common problem to solve for every developer. This was the hardest thing that I had to do at the time. And right now, when I look at the code and I see what I did there, it's facepalm emoji. But it works, it works. And this was I felt a huge sense of accomplishment because of this, even though it's horrible. And I think that's really important when you're starting out. Just make yourself feel good, make yourself you're actually progressing, and don't get too deep into things that are maybe not super important at the moment. And once you advance and once you understand a bit more and you can have a bit more fluency with the language and a bit more concepts, then definitely, gain also this deeper understanding.
And pick a right-sized project, right? You picked a good one there. You picked, Game of Life it's complex, but it's not over complex, and you're not bringing in all this extra. You probably didn't do it in SVG or Canvas tags or whatever. And it's I see a lot of folks go from 0 to they're trying to learn the guitar, right, or something, and they go from like knowing nothing to like trying to play like Stairway to Heaven as their first song. It's like, dude, okay, let's bring it back a little bit.
Is that a hard one? I have no idea.
Oh, okay, yeah, no, it's very complicated song.
Okay.
Okay, ouch, I feel old now. All right.
I know the reference, Jack. So if it makes you feel better.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I love the advice though of starting with free stuff, because I went the traditional university route, and for me, I saw the dropout happen between the first and the second year. Like there were a ton of people interested in coding the first year, and then by the second year, it was like half the people, or maybe even less than that dropped off. Which I think, like, a year of traditional university is enough for you to determine if it's for you or not. But the downside is those people paid money to be in those, like a a fairly significant amount of money to be in those classes, and a significant amount of time. So, but at the time, that's one of the benefits of modern software development, is that there is this free material out there for you to sort of kick the tires with and try out. And so that's really, really cool. Well, Iva, this has been fascinating. This has been an awesome chat.
Absolutely.
Lots of great advice. Is there anything, like any last tips, anything we've missed or haven't talked about that you feel is important, or any last advice that you want to give people?
Without sounding too cliche, I hope, I think that the best advice and the way that people can really learn how to be good developers is just by doing. And this is very like building projects, and it doesn't matter, right? So it could be like a personal small thing that you're interested in. It could be, something for your job that maybe you have. So one of the cool things that we have, for example, is kind of 10% time where you can build whatever you want. A lot of companies have that as well, or maybe in the process of introducing it, I hope. So just doing things, especially outside of your comfort zone. So me as a front-end developer, for example, I find it hard to do things maybe on the back end sometimes. Just challenging yourself. This is, I think, the best, really the best advice, and nothing else works, at least in my experience.
Nothing really learns like doing, Absolutely. Agreed.
Awesome. It's good words to end on. So why don't we move into our picks?
Hey, folks, if you love this podcast and would like to support the show, or if you wish you could listen without the sponsorship messages, then you're in luck. We're setting up new premium podcast feeds where you can get all of the episodes released after Christmas 2020 without the ads. Signing up will help us pay for editing and production, and you can go sign up at devchat.tv/premium.
Hello, man. It's a hard segue to make from that. But we're going to move into our picks, which is our segment where we pick just something from around our lives or some sort of tech that we want to pick. And Jack, do you want to kick us off today?
Sure. Boy, I watched 2 really good movies over the weekend. And the first one was Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is just, oh my God, so good, that movie. It's crazy good. And then, like, as if to like just go completely on the other end of the spectrum, we watched, was it Chippendale Rescue Rangers? Which was also insanely good. Just from but they're all like, you get in this world where you're like seeing the same movies over and over and over again because there's no creativity in the scripts. But both of those movies are just so creative and so, well, okay. Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's the movie you got to see, because I'm telling you, just like talking to Iva here, like it's very mind expanding. It's very like, oh wow, she's giving you a different perspective, and it's really good. That movie will give you a different perspective, and they do it really good.
Wait, they made a new Chip and Dale movie? Like this is an old movie you watch. This is
no. This is like now. But it's also it's very super. It's it's very 2022. It's very meta. It's very this, very that. But it's so well done.
Interesting. All right. I will check it out. Cool. So my pick for this week, I'm going to go with a tech-related pick and pick Postman. So if you have not heard of it before, just a tool for helping you just issue HTTP requests. It's like using curl if you've used that from the command line, but just gives you a lot of tooling around it. And I think it's a fairly well-known tool, but if you haven't used it before, it's just super nice. And it came up at work recently because we have a series of like API requests that we have to formulate up in a very specific way. And they have a lot of tooling around just importing and exporting those things. So if you have somebody else in your team that's like, okay, there's a common set of requests you're going to need to use for your work stuff, It gives you like some nice tooling to just ship those things around and share them. So, and it's free to use. Like, I don't think like I've paid them much money. I don't know actually their pricing. I got to, maybe I'm cheating the system actually.
Well, it's funny. I just talked to somebody at work about this, and I didn't know that it handles GraphQL, but apparently it handles like it's got, I mean, you can always do GraphQL, like it's because GraphQL is just basically REST, fancy REST, but they actually have like UI specific to GraphQL now.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. I'll also have to look if I'm supposed to be paying for business usage because I'm not totally sure what their terms are. So I should probably figure that out.
Evil man.
Iva, what picks do you have for us?
So this is going to sound probably a little bit random, but I recently picked up a new hobby, which is horse riding.
Awesome.
Horseback riding.
Yeah.
And it's I found it like so refreshing because for such a long time, all of my hobbies have been tech related, and it's been, either writing blog articles or building side projects or, staying up all night, trying to debug stuff. And I really love it and I really enjoy it. But I also think that it's super important to do something else from time to time.
Yeah.
And it's, for my mental health personally, it's really good to sometimes get off of the computer and just do something else. So I'm going to have this pick.
Can I be slightly geeky and ask if you're doing like English, Western, dressage? Like what kind of horseback riding are you doing?
So I've had like so far lesson and a half.
Okay.
But it's Western.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Nice.
And it's really
Very
cool. And
it is very cool.
The horses are super sweet. And
yeah.
they do what they want for the moment with me, but I will learn how to control and
Eventually. Yeah.
It's my wife's escape as well. So I've went several times. It's okay for me. Like I enjoy it, but I'm always happy like at the end, like, okay, that was fun. But whereas my wife, like I have to convince her. Sometimes I feel like if I left her on her own, we'd have 3 horses in our backyard and she'd be riding them around all the time. So it's another thing. If you haven't done it before, you should totally, much like software development, right? Try it out and see whether it's your thing.
Yeah,
indeed.
I love it.
And always follow the directions of the folks in the barn. They will tell you, like, stay away from that horse. That horse bites. Follow that advice because the horse will bite.
I usually tell them I have no idea what I'm doing, and they put me on like the old horse that's like gonna just trot around, and we're on the same page, so it usually works out well.
Exactly.
That's some strategic move there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like TJ, like you get the old horse.
So Eva, this has been great. Last question for you: if people want to follow you or check out your content, where is the best place for them to go?
So I am on Twitter. My handle is just Iva Kop. You can find it easily, hopefully. And also, as I said, my blog is called Where's the Mouse? So it's blog.where'sthemouse.com. And you can find hopefully interesting articles there.
Awesome stuff. Well, really appreciate you joining us this week. I definitely learned a lot, and there's some great advice there. So thanks one last time. And to everybody else, I'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. It was super nice.
It was great. Thank you.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.